Hi, my name's Jamie, and today we're going to go to the source and examine one of the primary sources that happened in the early days of Jamestown from the English perspective. And in looking at that primary source, we are going to uncover the indigenous perspective and talk a little bit about the gift exchange economy. One of the things we do here at Jamestown is we look at the English sources from early Jamestown, which often give us the English perspective on the interactions that the native people here in Virginia and the English had. So what I'm going to do today is take one of those sources and actually give you the Powhatan perspective on it and look at it from how the indigenous people would be interpreting the interaction. So the source we're going to be looking at today comes from William Strachey, which is one of the Englishmen that's here in the First Anglo-Powhatan War, which happens from the winter of 1609 to 1614. And he talks about some trade that's going on while the Powhatan and the English are in a period of war. And this trade happens up in the Tsenacommacah area. The Tsenacommacah were one of the tribes that were kind of on the fringe of the Powhatan chiefdom. And it gives you a really good look into the politics of the time period, because even though they're at war with the core tribes that are close around the Jamestown settlement, the Tsenacommacah are going to be interacting very differently with the English. So according to the quote written by William Strachey, within this river, Captain Samuel Argall, in a small river, which the Indians call Oqueaho, around 1610, trading in a bark called the Discovery for corn with the great king of the Tsenacommacah, from him obtained well near 400 bushels of wheat, peas, and beans, besides many kinds of furs, for 9 pounds of copper, 4 bunches of beads, 8 dozens of hatchets, 5 dozens of knives, 4 bunches of bells, 1 dozen of scissors, all not much more worth than 40 shillings English. So this quote gives a look into the value of the trade goods, which a lot of the primary source quotes that we use don't really get into how much they're trading with each other and what the values are. But when you actually break down the values are going to be very different from the European perspective versus how they are from the indigenous perspective. So I'd like to start by talking about, for the indigenous people, how their economy works. So the Europe operates on what's called a commodity-based system, which means that goods are exchanged based on their value and that you're getting some kind of an equal trade. But a lot of indigenous groups along the East Coast, so in Virginia, North Carolina, and really, up in the Great Lakes on the Pacific Coast, various groups all throughout the country operate on what's called a gift exchange economy, to where it's not really about the value of the goods, it's about the relationship that is built when people are giving each other a gift. So a lot of the reasons why Europeans and indigenous people had such a hard time adapting to each other's cultures early on is because the basic economic factors of their cultures operate so vastly differently that neither side really understood what the other side was doing. In a gift exchange economy, it's not really about what you're giving to somebody, it's about what that relationship cements by a gift being given. So when two different groups of people would interact, for indigenous people, it was understood that gifts would be exchanged. Now, it's not necessarily important what the goods are, but if the goods have more value, it does say more about the position of the person who is giving the gift. So if a werewance or a chief in one of the towns is going to give a gift, he's going to give something of higher value, which says something very important about his position within society. It says that I am doing very well, I am in a very important position, and I have the ability to gift you with something that is very rare, very important in society. Whereas what's going to happen to the person receiving the gift is now they have a debt to repay to the werewance or whoever is giving them the gift. So that now that person is obligated to, at some point in the future, return the gift. So it's not going to be right away. It's going to take a little bit of time. But eventually, now you are indebted to repay that gift. So it's this constant movement of goods in their society based on the gift exchange economy that really keeps it going. So goods aren't really necessarily owned in the way they're owned in Europe. They're going to be valued on the relationship that is built between the two people. So goods are constantly moving. So all of those goods that they're going to be getting in that quote are not going to be just benefiting one person. They're going to be continuously gift out. And these gifts can be based on new relationships that are forming and alliances that are building. These gifts can be about rewarding somebody for something they've done for you. For instance, there's always going to be extra fields planted in each of the towns that are going to be used by the chief for gift exchange in particular. So they do usually produce a surplus of food, and every time somebody works in their fields, so helps with that that extra food supply, they may be gifted something for their labor in putting into that field. If a man proves himself to be a good hunter or joins a war party and proves himself to be a good warrior, sometimes the wearer once would give gifts. So there's just this constant movement of goods in society, and withholding gifts means that not everybody in the society is benefiting from those gifts. So part of the problem the English are going to have early on is that they are not going to understand how this system works. So, they may come into a town and get feasted and be given gifts when they first interact with one of the tribes that lives in this area, but they may not understand that they are now obligated to come back and give gifts. So during these trade scenarios, from the indigenous perspective, what's happening is the indigenous people are seeing this as part of that gift exchange, whereas the English people are seeing this as a one and done deal. So they're coming into these towns and saying, I need some food and I'm going to give you these trade goods for it, and our interaction is now over. But from the indigenous perspective, what that has actually happened is that they have sealed an alliance together, and now they have this give and take relationship that's supposed to continue as we go into the future. So the reason this quote actually interacts with the Patawomic people, who I mentioned earlier are on the kind of fringe of the Powhatan chiefdom, is that the gifts as they're moving through society may not reach out to the fringe the way they do within the core groups. It may mean that Powhatan may not have the same political control. Like, he's got political control over the whole chiefdom, but maybe not as tight with the groups on the fringe. And so what the English are doing is they're going to those fringe groups thinking that, well, if we have a relationship and somehow the relationship goes sour, they're on the fringe and they may not attack us right away. But what's happening with those groups that live close to the English, they're seeing the English go to these fringe groups and trading with them, and they're thinking, why are they giving these gifts to these people who are so far away when we're their neighbors and we're the ones who have been hosting in our towns? So it's going to cause animosity with the groups that live close to the English, because they're thinking that they're being cut out of the gift exchange system and that they are also being snubbed in some way by the English. But the Patawomic are using it to their advantage because they may not be as close to Powhatan. He may not have as tight a control of them, and they're seeing it as their opportunity to bring in new goods so that their economy up in their area north of Jamestown can benefit from all these new gifts that are exchanging hands. So that's kind of a little overview of the gift exchange system. And there's a lot more to it than that, but it really wraps into a lot of that early interaction that the English and the indigenous have. And the way they value goods isn't necessarily always based on how rare it is, although that is very important, but sometimes it's just based on the relationship that you develop when you're exchanging these gifts. And when you do introduce new gifts like the ones the Europeans are bringing over, it is going to add some value to them. So if you have things that other people don't have, it's going to mean more when you gift them to somebody. So if you have wool cloth and other tribes around you don't have wool cloth, you are really demonstrating what your position is in society by saying that I have this cloth and I can gift it to you. It is something that you don't have, and it really says something about that person's position who is giving the gift. Thank you for joining us today and learning a little bit about the gift exchange economy for indigenous cultures. If you liked our video, please like and subscribe to our channel and comment in the section below, and we hope to see you for the next one.